Welcome to Oh My God, I'm Getting Older and So Is My Mom with Scott Greenberg of Comfort Care Senior Services, a show about coping with getting older ourselves and dealing with our aging parents. If you have questions about how to cope with these stresses, call Scott at 877-960-9960. Now, here's Scott.
So hello everybody, welcome to another edition of Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, So Is My Mom. We have a full house here tonight, but we're going to be talking about what I think may be, other than the birds and the bees, the most difficult conversation you're ever going to have with mom and dad. And that is, how do I take your car keys away? Or how do I take the car keys away? It's a very serious issue. I know that people struggle with this all the time. Should I take them away? Is it right to take them away? If I'm going to take them away, how do I do that? What reasons do I have to do that? We have three people who are experts in that here tonight, and I'm going to tell you all about them. There are lots of reasons that we take keys away, but clearly senior citizens, we've all seen it, 90-year-olds in the left lane doing 20 miles an hour. They have poor vision, they have poor reflexes, they have poor hearing, but they still want to drive. And one of the reasons they want to drive is there are no options. So in addition to talking about the problem, we're going to be talking about an interesting solution from Ruth Rales Jewish Family Services in Delray Beach called Kibbitz and Ride. So we're going to be talking about the paradigm of it's time to take the keys away, and then how do we make it easier if we decide to do that. But before we talk to my three great guests, we're going to do the Nostalgic America Minute question, which is brought to you by, of all things, Nostalgic America magazine. It has an iconic photo of Roadway out west on the cover this month. It's the summer issue. It is available at Joseph's, at Whole Foods. It's available at Way Beyond Bagels, the Boulevard, one of my favorite lunch places when I'm up here. It's everywhere, over 55 communities, up and down condominium communities. It's a great magazine. It has two of my favorite features. It's free and it's fun. And I encourage you to pick it up anywhere. And when you do pick it up, I certainly encourage you to look at page 43, where a brilliant article resides, written by, of all people, me. So I encourage you to look at page 43 for that. Tonight's question is another Florida-centric question. So all you locals, get ready. The Nostalgic America trivia question this week is: the world's shark tooth capital of the world is right here in Florida. The shark tooth capital of the world is right here in Florida. So what city in Florida is known as the shark tooth capital of the world? If you know, call us at 1-877-960-9960. That's 1-877-960-9960. And if you have questions about taking the keys away, write that number down, because you're going to have an opportunity to talk to Danielle Hartman, who is the president and CEO of Ruth Rales Jewish Family Services in Boca Raton and in Delray. And Lori Intandi is here tonight, and she is the director of senior services. And also in the studio is a volunteer driver for the Kibbitz and Ride program, which is a little bit what we're going to talk about, Bev Furring, who I just found out before we came on the air. She's also on the executive board. So she's clearly very active, both as a volunteer for people in need and for the agency as a whole. The Kibbitz and Ride program is a very interesting program that Ruth Rales has that we're going to discuss at length as the show unfolds. But first, we are going to talk about identifying what the problem is and talking about some of the issues involved in this touchy subject of taking the keys away. So, Danielle, why don't we start with you at a 30,000-foot level? Why is this such an important conversation?
Right. Thank you, Scott. Well, safety is really a key indicator here. I don't know if people realize, but by the year 2030, the number of drivers over the age of 65 will be 71 million. Wow. And many of them will responsibly give up driving, but others should not be driving. But without viable alternatives, they will continue to stay on the road long past the time that they should come off the road.
And some of the statistics are frightening as can be. Particularly, I mean, if we live in New York City, some of us, many of the listeners in New York City or any major metropolitan city, when they have public transportation, we don't really have a lot of public transportation down here. So people do hang on to those keys for a very long period of time, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I mean, some of the statistics that I've seen report that senior citizens accounted for 18% of all pedestrian fatalities. And that's huge. Also, seniors accounted for 13% of all vehicle occupant fatalities. So clearly those numbers are large for the population. And we see it all the time. All of us drive in South Florida, and we'll be behind the man or woman on the wheel who's in the wrong lane, or they're trying to cut across 3 lanes of traffic. And those are the times, we say, oh my gosh, this person should not be driving anymore. And what do we do?
It is a very scary statistic when you put those numbers to the fact that they don't represent an equal number of the population, that they are a disproportionate risk to those of us who are on the road. So, Lori, when does the problem start to appear?
Well, I think the first thing you need to take into consideration is what characteristics do we want a safe driver to have? We want them to have decent vision, to be able to see the road. We want them to be in relatively good physical condition so that their reflexes are quick enough to make those quick decisions when they need to when they're driving, so they can turn their head and look out the window behind them and see what's going on as well as in front of them. And we want them to be cognitively intact, so again, they can make good judgments.
Well, and I think coordination too. They have to be good. They have to have good coordination.
Certainly. Yeah.
I mean, reflexes are certainly. You told a story last week about the people with very thick glasses that came in. Maybe you could just share that, because it kind of identifies what the problem is. When we were preparing, this was a pretty funny story.
I mean, it's a funny story, but it's not a funny story. We had an orientation for a group that we were doing at our community center, at the Weissman Community Center in Delray, and we had a bunch of seniors come to learn about this new program we were offering. And we had advertised it as we were looking for generally somewhat healthier seniors who could walk on these trips and be able to appreciate these trips we were taking to things like the Everglades and whatnot. So we had a couple sitting in the back, man and a woman, with very, very thick Coke glasses on, trying to read our application form, and they were struggling mightily to fill this out. And the bottom line is they came up to me at the end and they said, we really can't fill it out. Can you give us some help? And I said, well, sure, but, you really should have better vision to take this trip. I said, by the way, how did you get to the center today? And he said, well, I drove.
Right. It's it's terrifying. I think I think that and I Bev, I want to get to you in terms of the volunteer program, and we will soon. But how do we approach the subject? When do we approach the subject? What is it about what's going on that says, time out, we have a problem here? Are there simple signs that we should be looking for?
Well, I think there are signs. Our case managers will go out and do assessments in the client's home, and I think this is an excellent venue to see the client in their environment. When you see that they're struggling with simple activities in the home, when you see that they might have confusion in the home about, is there food in the refrigerator, or did I get the laundry done today, or do I have a doctor's appointment? These are all red flags that we look at. One of the things, interestingly enough, that the case managers try to do when we see more intact senior citizens is, as part of our evaluation, we get them to talk right then and there about what would you do if you're not able to drive anymore. Mm-hmm. So you're starting the conversation before someone is impaired, as a preventative measure that you can then bring back to them when their difficulties start to occur.
I want to continue the conversation, but we have a caller, the winner of the question. So, Lori, welcome to Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, So Is My Mom. You think you know the answer to the question?
I think so. Is it Venice?
It is Venice. Venice, Florida, of course, not Venice, not Venice, Italy. And the audience is cheering. Anyway, I think John's going to take all your information down. We're going to have that. I appreciate your listening and calling in. We'll get 2 movie tickets out to you tomorrow.
Wonderful.
thank you for tuning in, and spread the word. We're here every Monday at 6 o'clock. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Scott, I was going to add along the lines of identification. I think Lori would agree that we get a lot more calls when we have family members who live out of the state coming down to visit with their mom or their dad. And they notice during that time, usually around holidays, we get a big spike in calls because they realize just driving around with mom or dad that things aren't so good and maybe it needs to be addressed. So we get a lot of calls around the holidays, or I think it's difficult for family members living outside of Florida to really know some of the things even that Lori's indicating. So really, we get a lot of calls, wouldn't you say, when it's holiday
Definitely.
time?
So, I was at a family's home the other day, and the woman in her 80s, very challenging medical condition, extremely challenging medical condition, and a full-time caregiver, and the family is desperately trying to figure out how to take the keys away. What if you hit a school bus, Mom? What if you plow in? What if you have an accident? What if you hurt somebody? And they don't want to give up their independence. Are there magic words? Is there something we can say and do?
There's no magic bullet, I'll tell you. But what you have to remember is to treat people with dignity, to treat people with respect. It is giving up independence. I mean, you have to call a spade here and recognize it for what it is. So what are you going to replace it with when you take the driving away?
Right.
Also, I think you have to allay the fear that many seniors have, is that when they give up driving, the next step is being placed in a facility, or right away they can't live in their homes anymore. So the beauty of maybe having a case manager involved or somebody very knowledgeable here is to let them know that there are options. We are here to provide information and resources and be an advocate for them so that they can stay home with assistance.
And we are going to talk to everybody before the end of the show about how they can reach you. But that's a good segue to what Bev is here to talk about, which is the volunteer program called Kibbitz and Ride. And we're going to go back and forth between the volunteer issue and also the taking the keys away. But Bev, maybe this is a point that I guess I probably should start with explaining what the program is, but we'll come back and talk about what the program is. But you volunteer, you take a number of people on errands, doctor's appointments, beauty parlor,
Yes,
whatever.
and it's so true what Lori and Danielle were speaking about. The fact that when I speak to the client, their number one concern is when they lose their ability to drive, they feel like they are losing a huge part of their independence, and it's very painful to them. And they're almost embarrassed about it. And they talk to me, I feel so bad that you have to come pick me up, that I can't do it myself. But then once they get into the program, they're actually excited for me to come pick them up and to drive them and to take them places, because it really helps them also just have another set of ears, and they talk to me about their families up north, and it's very comforting for their children up north to know that somebody's down here helping mom and driving them. It's so much more than just the transportation.
Is there ever a point in your time with the people that you have volunteered to drive, is there ever a point in time where they cross that magic divide and say, maybe I really shouldn't be driving? Because you don't have to be a non-driver to take advantage of this program. We're going to spend a lot of time on the program. So
right, because sometimes they'll tell me that they do drive locally. They'll go to the Publix or they'll go to the drugstore themselves. But once they get out of their half-mile radius, they're not comfortable driving.
Right, and so now you are in Delray, and we're going to come back and talk about all the specifics about this. I think we'll come back, we'll talk about all the specifics, but if you're just tuning in, perhaps the most difficult conversation you're ever going to have with mom and dad is, Mom, Dad, it's time to take the car keys away. They don't want to give it up. They're worried about the lack of independence. They're afraid that they will be prisoners in their own homes, and it's a very, very scary thing. On the other hand, letting them continue to drive is another scary thing. So balancing that is really difficult. So this is Scott Greenberg on Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, So Is My Mom. I'm here with three people who are involved in this every day. Danielle Hartman, who is the president and CEO of Ruth Rales, Lori Antandi, who is the director of senior services at Ruth Rales, and Bev Furing, who is both on the executive board of Ruth Rales, but more importantly, she's here tonight as a volunteer for the Kibbitz and Ride program. So if you're just tuning in, in and you want to ask questions about taking the keys away, I encourage you to call us at 1-877-960-9960. That's 1-877-960-9960.
Joining us is Scott Greenberg. He's the president of Comfort Care Senior Services, serving Palm Beach and Martin County. Scott, tell us a little bit about what kind of stresses caregivers are dealing with today.
You know, Mike, it's really a serious subject. In the area of Alzheimer's specifically, it's a stated statistic, 64% of family caregivers will predecease their family member who is suffering from Alzheimer's. So what we do at Comfort Care is we help alleviate that stress by putting a caregiver in, allowing the family member to go on and do the things that are important to them. And so caregiver stress plays a much, much bigger role than people give it credit for.
Scott, if we'd like to get in touch with Comfort Care Senior Services, how should we do it?
You can reach us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at 561-630-1620, or you can always reach out to us on our website. You can email me at scott.greenberg@comfortcare.com or palmbeach.comfortcare.com, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Welcome back to Oh My God, I'm Getting Older and So Is My Mom with Scott Greenberg of Comfort Care Senior Services on Seaview Radio, 95.9 FM, 106.9 FM, and 960 AM. Reach Scott with your questions, 877-960-9960. Now, back to Scott.
Oh my God, I'm getting older, and so is my mom, and my mom is still driving, and it's a danger, and it's scary. So we're talking about that situation tonight. It is scary from the point of view of a senior driving. It's scary for a child, even if that child is 60 or older, to talk to mom and dad about that. There's a lot of emotions going on with this. I think, why do aging seniors, I guess aging drivers, pose a greater risk? What is it that's going on that makes them riskier for for the general population and to themselves?
Well, you think about it, Scott. You know, if you have a senior behind the wheel of a car, we'll take an obvious a scenario here with Parkinson's disease, okay? And they do not have good control over their limbs, all right? And they have to make a quick decision, or they've got to turn that wheel, or they've got to get to that horn first. Whatever the situation is, they're not going to be doing it, okay? It's just not going to happen. If you have a person who's driving with beginning or even moderate cognitive impairment, okay, this person is going to get confused. This person's going to be on the road and may forget that what the red light means and what the green light means. I mean, it sounds so simple to us, but this is not simple. You know, some of this muscle memory does gets impaired, and we don't make those good decisions anymore. I can tell you from experience, I have a 98-year-old mother, and we finally got the keys away from her when she was backing off the entrance to the turnpike. Right. And this was not a good scenario. Sometimes it has to wait to a crisis situation. Right. But I would just say very quickly, one other point that I wanted to make is that I don't want family members to think that this is a one-time conversation that you are going to have with your parent or your relative. This is a conversation that's got to occur over many, many times. And you may very gradually have to start with, maybe you don't want them driving a certain distance, okay? Maybe you don't want them driving at night. And if you start to do things in these little steps, you will achieve a much greater success of working with them to lessen the driving and eventually get them to stop driving, rather than go in as a gangbuster and just try to take those keys away.
So doesn't have to be an all or nothing solution.
It most definitely does not have to be an all or nothing.
And in fact, in most cases, it's better if it's
works
not.
Better.
If it's not, if it's
Absolutely.
gradual. Which brings us to the purpose of Kibbitz and Ride, which is a program, Danielle, originally was founded or funded by a grant. Maybe talk about that, and then let's go into some specifics.
Well, actually, the program was started in 1999 and ran for many years with a very small group of volunteer drivers. There were maybe 10 to 15 drivers, and we started to see the need grow, and I had an idea that with the cost of gas going up so much, that maybe one of the impediments to driving, the volunteers to driving, was the cost of gas. So we wrote a grant which was funded originally the first year in 2010 with the Retirement Research Foundation, which would provide funding to reimburse drivers for gas. every mile they drive, they would get a reimbursement for the gas. And it also helped us pay for secondary car insurance for the volunteers, because while the volunteers are driving, their personal car insurance is the primary support factor for insurance, but we provide secondary insurance, which helps alleviate another impediment for a volunteer to drive. So from 2010 to the current 2013, we went from giving maybe 40 or 50 rides a week to giving close to 300 rides a week. So it's a huge increase. And we also grew our volunteer base from the 10 or 15 to over 40. And what we see is a lot of our volunteer drivers are seasonal. So when our snowbirds are away, we have a greater need for volunteers. And then when they're here, we just continue to see a rise in the number of rides that are being requested, because, as Bev said earlier, it's so much more than a ride. So we had the funding from Retirement Research Foundation for 3 years, and each year they gave us a little bit more because we kept expanding the number of rides. And now that that funding has ceased, and we now are privately funding it through donations and through some sponsors that we have for the program. And some of our volunteers actually donate their miles back to the agency and don't take the reimbursement, and we are able to filter that back into the program as well.
So the program is multifaceted. I mean, one of the things that we're here tonight for is you need volunteers for people who are interested. We need volunteers. And we're going to give everybody a way that you can volunteer before the end of the show. And we encourage you to volunteer. You also could use a few bucks. That wouldn't hurt either. But most important is that this program serves a multitude of purposes. It helps seniors in ways that one can only begin to understand. And Bev, that's kind of where you come in, because you are one of those people who are kind enough to volunteer to take people away. So tell us, what does it do for you? What does it do for the seniors? Why are you doing this?
Okay. Well, I just wanted to mention, for those that aren't familiar, kibbitz is a Yiddish word. Kibbitz means kind of light conversation, joking around, just being chit-chatty with the client. So obviously that's Kibbitz and Ride for those that aren't familiar with the term. In terms of volunteering, it enhances the lives of both people, the person who's volunteering and the individual that is benefiting from the service. I mean, I feel sometimes like the clients can never stop thanking me enough, because obviously, they want to pay me, they want to, and all this, and there's no charge to the client, and I feel sometimes like I'm getting way more out of it than they are. And like I said, it's more than the physical transportation. I help them. A lot of times the client might have a walker or a wheelchair, or they may have an assistant with them, and I help them. I go to the doctor. Now, I stay with them at the doctor because, to me, it's nice downtime for me. I could bring a book, and I feel like I want to be there as soon as they get out, and it's nice for them. So sometimes if they want to take public transportation, they might have to wait outside in the heat, and, it's a nice option for them. And other than that,
and you don't just take people to doctor's appointments; you take them to pretty interesting places.
Right. Well, we feel the agency feels is sometimes it's important for the client not just to go to the doctor, but it may be the only time that they get out of their home. And if they want to go to a salon, to us that's just as important, to make them feel good about themselves. And if they have to have a salon appointment, or if they have to go buy gifts for grandchildren for something that's coming up, and they have no other way to get out.
One of the most interesting things that you talked about the other day was taking people to the cemetary to visit their loved ones in the cemetery.
Yes.
I mean, so it doesn't have to be just that. But we haven't. Are there things that have happened? Is it all upside? Are there downsides to this?
Well, it's mostly upside, I'll be honest. I think it's mostly upside. The only downside is it's time intensive. Now, the agency is wonderful. They try and give you at least a week leeway, so they'll call. There's a staff person that manages all the calls, and she'll call me and give me dates and times that are available, and if I can do it, I do it with pleasure, and if I can, I tell her no, and she'll go on to another volunteer. But it is time consuming for the volunteer. You have to be able to give a couple hours of your time during the day as often as you can. If you can only drive one day a week or one time a month, it's helpful. Every drive is helpful.
And to the point about easing people away from taking the keys away, do you drive people who are themselves still driving on occasion?
Yes, yes. In fact, one story, one time I picked up this gentleman in a senior community, and I dropped him off at home, and then I left, and I saw him drive out right behind me. He passed me on the way out of his community speeding. So I immediately called the caseworker, and she said, he's not supposed to be driving. And they had to follow up on that. He had taken his car, they took his keys away, his driver's license was expired. And, so that's the other thing is as a volunteer, I'm eyes and ears for the caseworkers also. When I go pick up a client, and I always go door to door to see if they need help physically, when they open the door, I could see, is there a problem in the apartment? Are they hoarding? Are there newspapers stacked up by the front door that have never been opened? Is the temperature correct in the apartment? I mean, it's also another set of eyes and ears going in to check on the client.
I want to go back to one of the things that Bev said because I think it's really important. And, there are other options for transportation in our community, but many of them have limitations as to what you can or cannot use those services for. And so there have been so many studies about isolation and enabling people the importance of not being isolated and keeping socialization in your life in order for seniors to continue to age in place safely for as long as possible. So taking someone to the cemetery or taking them to get their hair done, they would not be able to get a public ride with for free, or they could probably pay a taxi and pay $30 each way, which is very cost prohibitive for many people. I think cost is a huge factor. Even with Palm Trend, which is a low cost alternative as well, it's $3 each ride. But if you think about it, if you're using it every single day, that's $30 a week. And if you're on a very limited income, then that becomes a problem. So we work in tandem with a lot of the other services that are out there in the community, like Palm Tran, like the Volin Center's LIFT program, like Federation Transportation Services. And we do the best we can to provide a service that may not be supplemented in another way. Or there's also a convenience factor. Many of those other options are shared rides.
Right.
And this is not a shared ride.
Yeah, this is a one-on-one event.
It's a one-on-one in a private car.
Right.
And it's more than just a driver picking you up and taking you. Like Bev said, there becomes a relationship. And we've had, what's the longest time you've been driving any single client?
Yeah, many years.
The same person consistently,
Right.
And that's so important to
and
the
other
socialization.
the other thing that's important.
So if you're just tuning in, this is Scott Greenberg on Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, So Is My Mom. We're talking both about taking the keys away and about alternative driving options. And one of the things that we're talking about is a program that Ruth Rales Jewish Family Services has in Delray and Boca, and we're going to talk more about that. We're also going to talk about some of the things you can do if you think you need to take the keys away, because we haven't gotten there, and how easy it is to keep your driver's license even when you're 95 years old. And we have a pretty funny story about that as well. So if you have questions for my guest, I encourage you to call us at 1-877-960-9960. That's 1-877-960-9960.
Joining us is Scott Greenberg. He's the president of Comfort Care Senior Services, serving Palm Beach and Martin County. Scott, at Comfort Care Senior Services, your employees have really gone above and beyond with their Alzheimer's training.
We are the only agency, at least I think we still are, the only agency that has contracted with the Alzheimer's Association to do additional training for a group of our caregivers over and above the state requirement. In addition to that, I personally have gone through the new 7-hour training program at Alzheimer's Community Care and have worked closely with Alzheimer's Community Care on developing a training program specifically for the Guardian community, which I am very involved in.
Scott, if we'd like to get in touch with Comfort Care Senior Services, how should we do it?
You can reach us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at 561-630-1620, or you can always reach out to us on our website. You can email me at scott.greenberg@comfortcare.com or palmbeach.comfortcare.com, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Welcome back to Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, and So Is My Mom, with Scott Greenberg of Comfort Care Senior Services on Seaview Radio, 95.9 FM, 106.9 FM, and 960 AM. Reach Scott with your questions, 877-960-9960. Now, back to Scott.
So welcome back, everybody. Oh my God, I'm getting older, and so is my mom, and she is still driving, and that is scary. Taking someone's keys away can be a really difficult conversation. It does not have to be, however, the end of one's independence, and it doesn't have to be a fight every time you have that conversation. There are things that you can do that we're talking about, some tips that you can employ when you get to the point where mom or dad should not be driving anymore. And we talked a little bit about some of the statistics that deal with this issue. And we talked about an exciting program at Ruth Rales Jewish Family Services called Kibbitz and Ride. Some of them, people who are not Jewish would say kibbitz, but everybody understands Kibbitz and Ride. But anyway, we're here with Danielle Hartman, who's the president and CEO of Ruth Rales. We're here with Lori Tandy, who is the Director of Senior Services, and Bev Furing, who is one of the volunteers, as well as being on the executive board. If you have questions about this subject, or about pretty much anything at all, you can call us at 1-877-960-9960. Before we broke, we were talking about the volunteer program, and let's talk a little bit about the training program for volunteers. We'll go there, and then we'll go back to some of the more serious side of things.
Okay. Well, when I initially had approached Jewish Family Services about volunteering, they said their biggest need was volunteer drivers. So in order to become a volunteer driver, you need to fill out forms, become fingerprinted, and go through a background check. And the reason for that is you are dealing with, the frail elderly, and they want to make sure that you are, properly vetted. And they check your driving record, and they will check out your car to make sure it's safe and functioning well.
All right. So the problem is serious. It's pretty easy to renew one's driver's license in the state of Florida, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, I know, Lori, it's kind of funny, although it's not really funny. You have a story about...
Yeah, I've got a story that when my father was still alive at 85, he had gotten his license renewed when he was 80, which, he had to pass just a vision test, and he got his license renewed. And then at 85, unfortunately, he passed away. And 4 months after that, he got his license renewal in the mail. So these things happen, and they fall through the cracks. There's no question about it. But what I would segue into here is, as much as we talk about, we want to try to work with our seniors and have that dialogue and continue to keep moving them towards it being an acceptable solution to them to give up the keys. Sometimes that is not a viable option. And we really, both professionally, as a social worker, we see it, a physician could see it, a family member could see it, anyone can see that this person does not belong on the road. So what are your options then? There is a medical reporting form. Even though it's a medical reporting form, anybody can use this form to report an unsafe driver on the road. It is a confidential form. It can be downloaded on the computer at the Department of Motor Vehicles website. And what they're going to ask you on this form is the name and some demographic information about the driver. If you know the city they live in, their zip code, their address, if you know their driver's license number. And then they're going to ask you to give a brief description of what you as an individual see as the problem. They give you some suggestions for medical, like seizures, loss of consciousness, sleep disorder, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, dementia, memory, severe visual. You're going to fill this out with your name and address on this as well, but it is a confidential reporting item. When the motor vehicle department gets this form, within 60 days, they will contact the driver, and they will request that the driver go for a driving evaluation.
Now, we've talked about this before. The driver evaluation test, you don't have to wait to be reported. It doesn't have to be in response to an anonymous report. If children think their parents are incapable of driving, they can encourage mom or dad to go to that evaluation test. That's done all over the county. I mean, it's not unusual for people to do that.
We also encourage the seniors. Look, if you think that you are a competent driver, prove it. Get mom and dad off your back. Take the test. We have two centers where the test can be done. We have one in Delray and we have one in Boca. In Boca, it's the FAU Memory and Wellness Center gives the test, and in Delray, it's at Pinecrest Rehabilitation Hospital gives the test. I would encourage any senior who believes that they still belong on the road, go have that test done, and then show those results to your children. And by the way, just as a point of information, when you do go voluntarily for these tests, the agency giving the test does not have a moral or a legal obligation to report those results to motor vehicle unless they feel you are definitely a hazard on the road and you failed the test, you should get off the road.
So Danielle, the alternatives when you don't have your driver's license anymore are kind of slim down here, and it's hard. Now, the Kibbitz and Ride program is one solution, but there are others.
Right.
We glossed over them a little bit.
Sure. So one of the big alternatives around, which most people are familiar with, is PalmTran. They have a transportation disadvantaged program, which is a shared ride, and they will pick you up within a specified window and then bring you back. So that is an option. But I think for many people, they get a little scared. I mean, when was the last time you took public transportation down in Florida? When was the last time you rode a bus? And PalmTran does do a good job coming out into the community centers to try to educate people on how you even look up what your best route would be. And they have phone numbers you can call, which would help people determine what route they would need to go or how to access PalmTran. So, we do have a partner in PalmTran. Some of the disadvantage of a shared ride is that it's not one-on-one. You may have a doctor's appointment at 9 and they might have to pick you up at 7 because they have other people on your ride. So, that's just the reality. It's not a good or a bad thing. It's just the reality. There's also the Volin Center. They have their community coach, which is a shared bus ride similar to the PalmTran. And they also have a Lyft program, which is relatively new. And it doesn't use volunteers, although it does have individual passenger cars, sedan type cars that will drive people. It's got a limited radius right now as far as where they'll serve, just because of the way their funding is. They have an area.
And I believe that a lot of the clients do use many of the services, because when I always call to confirm when I get the ride from our JFS staff person. I call them immediately and say, I've confirmed, so they know they have the ride. And oftentimes they'll say to me, where are you calling from? And she'll say, are you from Volin? Are you from, so I think a lot of our clients do utilize more than one service.
And we try to supplement. So, for instance, with our Kibbitz and Ride program, if we are not able to get a volunteer driver, we'll sometimes give out a PalmTran voucher. So at least we'll give an alternative method for somebody to get somewhere and not just leave them high and dry. Timing is another issue. Everybody needs a leeway, especially with a program like ours with a volunteer. We don't have staff people to make the rides, so we have to have a leeway. But many of the programs like PalmTran, there's I think it's a 48-hour, you have to call ahead 48 hours, the Volin Center Lyft program, and also the Jewish Federation has a program called Federation Transportation, and that's a shared ride again. So with the exception of the Lyft program, which all of those programs charge per ride one way. Our program, we don't charge by the ride, but we charge an annual fee to access the program, and that really covers the case management time and the administrative time to find rides and to coordinate the rides, and it's a fraction. It's really pennies on the dollar than what you would pay any of these other services.
And compared to taxis, which pick you up, drop you off, maybe show up to pick you back up. It's
right.
There aren't a lot of options if you don't take advantage of programs like this.
And the taxi, which would be the next best alternative to an individual ride, is so cost prohibitive for so many seniors living on fixed incomes that really only a small segment of the population can access that.
And let's remember, too, not only do they have the eyes and ears of the volunteer, they also have a case manager assigned to work with them who sees them during the year and can also be aware of anything that's going on that's changing, so they can access some of our other programs that we offer.
Yeah, and I wanted to go back to something when we were talking about, the tests and the senior can say, I want to get the test done. Or I would like to sort of raise the awareness with the professionals, the doctors, the eye doctors, when they're examining their patients and they see, maybe they could start the conversation too. Are you still driving? Are you aware of other alternatives? Suggest they go for a test. It's got to be a community effort.
I mean, that's a good point, because I had a conversation before we came over to the studio tonight. I had a conversation with a family whose internist was just checking out whatever the complaint was at the moment and was kind of not doing what you said they do. The professional community could learn something from this and could support, if we were all working together, could support a family member's desire to influence a senior citizen to not drive anymore. Am I right?
I agree totally. I would like to see all the professionals in the community to become more aware of the services. I mean, even the case management Lori's mentioned a few times, the value of a case manager, not just helping to coordinate rides, but to be the eyes and ears for the family when they're not close by, and working with the doctors and the other professionals to coordinate care so that our seniors can age in place. It has to be a team effort, and unfortunately, at the stage of the game it is right now, there's a lot of silos, but with the changing Medicare changing and the health care industry changing in general, I think we'll start to see some of the silos breaking down and more partnerships forming, and then at the end of the day, we'll have more seniors living at home, which is actually less expensive than sending someone off to a nursing home.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And we absolutely need to do a better job of communicating to all constituencies the value in finding alternatives to seniors being on the road when they shouldn't be. So if you're just tuning in, this is Scott Greenberg on Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, So Is My Mom, and you're listening to us, of course, on Seaview Radio, 95.9 FM, 960 AM, and 106.9 on the Treasure Coast. If you have questions for my guest, Lori Intondi, who's the Director of Senior Services for Ruth Rales Jewish Family Services, or Beth Fearing, who is a volunteer and also on the Executive Board of Ruth Rales, and of course Danielle Hartman, who is the President and CEO, you can call me or us at 1-877-960-9960. That's 1-877-960-9960.
Joining us is Scott Greenberg. He's the president of Comfort Care Senior Services, serving Palm Beach and Martin County. Scott, what are some of the payment options we have with Comfort Care Senior Services?
Well, of course, we accept all long-term care insurance, and so if you have a long-term care insurance policy, we will take it and accept assignment. We also will work with you to help get veterans benefits if you're eligible for aid and attendance. On some cases, if you're part of Medicaid diversion, we'll work with that depending upon the agency. And lastly, of course, there is private pay options.
Scott, if we'd like to get in touch with Comfort Care Senior Services, how should we do it?
You can reach us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at 561-630-1620, or you can always reach out to us on our website. You can email me at scott.greenberg@comfortcare.com or palmbeach.comfortcare.com, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Welcome back to Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, and So Is My Mom, with Scott Greenberg of Comfort Care Senior Services on Seaview Radio, 95.9 FM, 106.9 FM, and 960 AM. Reach Scott with your questions, 877-960-9960. Now, back to Scott.
Oh my God, I'm getting older, so is my mom. We're talking about taking the keys away. What a terrible, difficult, but necessary conversation. And I think it's time we spend a few minutes in approaching just some tips that perhaps we could give to the audience. And maybe Lori, if you want to take this, it's fine. What are some of the things that we should be saying to seniors that might encourage them to not be so intransigent about keeping the keys?
Well, I think the first thing that we want to try to keep in mind is, as angry as we are as adult children of seniors, our tone is very important. Our seniors are very sensitive to this issue. And our male seniors are even more sensitive to it. We didn't touch on the male-female issue here. And even though we have so many more women seniors down here than we have men, the men are extremely resistant to giving up that driver's license. And that, we could spend a long time on why, but I think we all know how it's more tied in with men. But what we say to our adult children is, remember your tone. You want to go in there not as an enemy, not as an adversary. You want to go there as someone who is a helpful person, and you want to present alternatives to your parent. And this is why it's so important to know what the resources are. We say to these phone calls we get, let us provide you with resources when you talk to your parent. Do not try to accomplish everything at one time. In other words, don't try to get them to give up driving at the same time that you are talking to them about how, they also have to stop going out and spending so much money at the restaurant because they haven't been able to pay their medical supplement and they're asking their kid for help financially. Okay, so really, really, when you talk to children, get them to understand what is the most important issue that you want to work on with your parent. If it is the driving, you go in there slowly. You can use a little bit of, Mom, it hurts me so much when I think of you on the road because I've heard some bad statistics about what's happening in Florida. I don't want you to be one of those statistics. Not that you're going to be the one that causes the accident, but you might be in an accident.
Right.
And
right.
how I would feel about that, losing you, Mom. I don't want to lose you. You want that person to know how valuable they still are to you, that they are still a valuable part of the world, of society, to their grandchildren, whatever it is that you have to use to get them to understand that they can be doing it for you, they can be doing it for a spouse, they can be doing it for the community, for anybody. So you go in with sensitivity, you go in with remembering they want to keep their dignity, okay? And you're not chastising them, you're not infantilizing them, you don't want to treat them like they're their children. And often that happens in this situation where there is a role reversal. So be aware of this.
And I would say, too, going back to something Bev mentioned earlier along those lines of what Lori's saying, is also try to ease into it. Suggest, okay, maybe you stop driving at night, and maybe you try a couple rides with something like Kibbitz and Ride or Palm Tran or whatever it is, and sort of ease into it that way. And then I think as they get more comfortable with whatever option they choose, hopefully, they'll see the value and that their independence will not be limited or taken away. And I also think the value of having a case manager, you can call Ruth Rales Jewish Family Service or any other.
How can we call Ruth
Yes,
Rales
well,
Jewish Family
let me
Service?
tell you. It's a really easy number to remember. The number is 561-852-3333. And you'll be connected to a case manager, and we have 2 locations, Boca Raton and Delray Beach. And we can help you with the language, we can help you with the information referral, we can help get you hooked up with not just Kibbitz and Ride, but we have a number of other services available that we provide to the community, and start the conversation.
And repeat that number again for those who didn't write it down fast enough.
It's 561-852-3333, or you can visit our website. All these programs and more are on our website, which is www.ruthrales, RUTHRALES,
That's great. Just to kind of circle back to where we began, some of the statistics, I know, Danielle, you and I were talking about them. I'm reading some of the statistics you supplied me. There are going to be nearly 10 million people who are going to be 85 by 2030. And I don't think any of us, I'm going to be 65 in only 18 months or less, but I'm going to be 65. And I know I don't drive the way I used to. At 85, I can't imagine I'm able to drive the way I can. So I think this is a really serious issue. And as Lori so well articulated, it's not just the person you might hurt in an accident, but it's you yourself that is there. This is serious, and stubbornness doesn't play well here, does it?
No, not at all. And I think with the volunteer piece, as Bev mentioned, the volunteers really can dictate when they're available to drive. So even if you have 2 hours to volunteer one day a week, that is so helpful because we just are getting more and more calls every day. So whether you're a stay-at-home mom and you can offer a couple hours while your kids are in school, or you are a retiree and you're looking to just fill your time a little bit, or even if you're still working and maybe you work an alternate schedule and you can volunteer a couple hours on a day that you have some time available. Even if people think I can't do it because I have so little time to give, really it doesn't matter. As Bev mentioned, sometimes a volunteer will drive one way and they'll take a different form of transportation back home. Any little bit counts, and we really need volunteers because as the demand grows and as we have people with different schedules, we just need more and more volunteers to fill that need.
It's incredibly fulfilling for the volunteer.
I was just going to say,
it's going
to be a win-win.
Right, to hear their
right?
stories, their experiences are fascinating, and their perspectives, and at the same time know that you are making such a huge difference in someone's life.
Yeah, it's terrific.
Yeah, it is pretty terrific.
And along the lines of the volunteers, in addition to the training and the background checks we do when they initially come on, we do monthly training with our volunteers, and some of the topics are dementia, Alzheimer's. Having if the client wants you to do something that you can't do because it's not part of what you're supposed to be doing, how you use your language to set barriers and things like that. Like Bev said, they want to give her money, and just having the language. So we, training and education is a big focus of what we do, because it's important to give our volunteers as many tools, and they are like our eyes and our ears, because we only have a limited number of case managers available, and so we have over 200, I think we have close to 300 volunteers doing many, many things throughout the agency, and they're all in some capacity our first link to the client when we can't have a case manager right there. And we work with our community partners like you and other people to try to coordinate the services as best we can. So this is just one opportunity, one volunteer or service that people can access, which helps them have a better quality of life, live longer, and stay at home safely.
So we have a few minutes left, but before we get to the last point or two, if you just tuned in, the Nostalgic America trivia question was, what city in Florida is known as the shark tooth capital of the world? And Lori called in and she knew the answer. Prehistoric shark's teeth have been a favorite pastime of visitors who are residents of Venice, Florida. We are known, in fact, as the shark tooth capital of the world. Brought to you by Nostalgic America magazine, available everywhere. An iconic photo on the cover of the open road on the west. I encourage you to pick it up, and of course I encourage you to pick it up and read page 43. You can see me and my grandson on the cover if you like. Nostalgic America magazine, available everywhere. It's free and it's fun and it's great, and the summer issue is on the newsstands now. Next week, we're going to be discussing another program from the other Jewish Family Services here in Palm Beach County. We're going to have a couple of guests from Alpert Jewish Family and Children's Services, and we're talking about self-management of chronic diseases. There's a new program out of Stanford University that helps train the trainer on how to help people self-manage chronic diseases. It's a very interesting program. 3 people from Alpert Jewish Family are going to be here, and I think we're going to have somebody from Stanford University call in. It hasn't been confirmed yet, but we're looking forward to that. I encourage you to tune in. In 2 weeks, we're going to do a show that I've actually never done before. I'm going to do a show about what I do at Comfort Care and what private duty home care does. So it's not just what I do at Comfort Care, it's what people like us do. I'm going to review some most frequently asked questions about private duty home care and how it differs from Medicare, and we're going to talk about different options that you have for care if you need care at home. Again, I've never done that before. I've never used this pulpit for that purposes, but there are so many things that are going on, particularly in the area of Alzheimer's and dementia, and I'm going to talk about some of the things you should encourage your providers to do if your family member has Alzheimer's and dementia. And while I say your family, I'm going to do it with my family, my daughter, my son-in-law, and my wife doesn't realize it, but she's going to be on the air as well, and we're going to be talking about that. But I wanted to remind you, if you like this show, if you missed part of it, and sorry that you missed it, you can always listen again. It will be on tomorrow on podcast on iTunes. You can just download Oh My God, I'm Getting on the search engine at iTunes podcast, and up will pop. Of course, I archive all of this on my website, palmbeach.comfortcare, COMFORCARE.com, palmbeach.comfortcare.com. You can download the TuneIn Radio app on your smartphone so you can listen wherever you are. No excuses. If you're not listening, turn it up. Or you can download it, or you can listen live at www.seaviewradio.com. So in the 130 seconds we have left, how do people get in touch if they're interested in volunteering, donating money, or learning how to do this for their family? How do people get in touch?
Right. So again, our number is 561-852-3333. You can go visit our website, which is www.ruthralesjfs.org. And we'd love to hear from you.
That'd be great, and I hope that you take
you.
advantage and call. So Danielle, Lori, Bev, I
you.
want to thank you for a great
you.
show.
Welcome.
For all of you, I thank you for tuning in. Scott Greenberg, Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, So Is My Mom. Every Monday night, 6:06. Tune in next week for a great show. Have a good night, everybody.